Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, and that's when I knew my marriage was officially a joke. I'm Elliot Harper, 41 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years keeping Chicago's financial district from getting hacked by teenagers in their parents' basements. I'm good at what I do, and damn good, but apparently not good enough to make my wife's guest list. The email was sitting right there on Cassie's laptop screen when I brought her coffee. She'd left it open, probably figuring I was too boring to look. The subject line read, VIP Gala Invitations. Final confirmation. I shouldn't have looked. But after 3 months of cold shoulders, mysterious late nights, and her friends giggling whenever I walked into a room, curiosity got the better of me. Cassie Harper +1, confirmed. Table 12, VIP section. +1. Not Cassie and Elliot Harper, just +1, like I was some interchangeable accessory she might or might not bring along. Morning, babe, Cassie said, floating into the kitchen in that silk robe that used to drive me crazy. Now it just reminded me of how far apart we'd grown. She was 39 but looked younger, thanks to yoga classes that cost more than my car payment and a skincare routine that required its own spreadsheet. Coffee's ready, I said, not mentioning the email. Big day at the agency? She took the mug without looking at me, already scrolling through her phone. The usual chaos. Brandon's having a meltdown about the Morrison account. Brandon Lee. Her boss, her mentor, her golden boy with the Porsche and the corner office. I'd met him exactly twice in 5 years, both times at company Christmas parties, where he'd shaken my hand and immediately forgotten my name. Will you be home for dinner? I asked. Probably not. We're doing final prep for the Gala next week. She finally looked up, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe. Or just annoyance that I was still standing there. You know how these things are. Actually, I didn't. Because apparently, I wasn't invited to know. After she left, I did what any self-respecting IT guy would do. I dug deeper. Cassie's digital security was about as solid as tissue paper. Same password for everything. Creative 2019, the year she got promoted to creative director at Morrison & Associates. Her text messages told the whole story. 3 months of conversations with Brandon that started professional and got progressively less so. Plans for working dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford. A weekend trip to Milwaukee that was definitely not the yoga retreat she'd told me about. But the real gut punch was a group chat with her work friends, Tina, Mallory, and Simon. They called it the inner circle, which should have been my first clue about how pathetic my life had become. Tina. So is Elliot coming to the gala? Cassie. God, no. Can you imagine? He'd spend the whole night talking about firewalls and making dad jokes. Mallory. Harsh but fair. Remember last year when he wore that tie? Simon. The one with the little computers on it? Classic suburban dad energy. Cassie. I told him it's invitation only for industry people. He bought it completely. Tina. You're terrible. I love it. I sat in my home office staring at the screen, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. 15 years of marriage, and this was how she talked about me. Like I was an embarrassing pet she had to hide from her real friends. My phone buzzed. Jerome, my best friend since college, wanting to grab lunch. You look like someone stole your lunch money, he said when I met him at Murphy's Pub. Jerome was ex-Chicago PD, built like a linebacker, with the kind of easy confidence that made people want to tell him their problems. Worse, I said. Someone stole my dignity. I told him everything. The email, the texts, the group chat. Jerome listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making disgusted noises at the particularly brutal parts. So, what are you going to do? He asked when I finished. I don't know. Confront her? Get a lawyer? Move to Montana and raise sheep? Or, Jerome said, leaning forward with a grin that made me nervous, you could crash the party. I can't just show up. Security will throw me out. Not if you're supposed to be there. He pulled out his phone. My cousin Danny does security for half the fancy venues in the city. The Meridian Hotel, right? Where they're having this thing? I nodded. Danny owes me a favor. Big one. I'm thinking you show up in a nice suit, act like you belong, and see what happens. And then what? Make a scene? Throw a drink in someone's face? You're thinking too small, Elliot. You're an IT guy. You know how to make things malfunction. The idea was crazy, stupid, potentially illegal. I was absolutely going to do it. The Meridian Hotel looked like something out of a movie, all glass and steel, reaching toward the Chicago skyline. Valets in crisp uniforms jogged between Porsches and BMWs, while women in dresses that cost more than my mortgage tottered across the marble lobby in heels that could double as weapons. I'd spent 2 days preparing. New suit, courtesy of a credit card Cassie didn't know about. A fake business card identifying me as Elliot Harrison Digital Marketing Consultant. Close enough to my real name that I'd answer to it, vague enough that nobody would ask hard questions. The real preparation had been digital. 3 days of reconnaissance had given me the hotel's Wi-Fi passwords, staff schedules, and a complete floor plan. I'd even managed to get a copy of the guest list, which confirmed what I already knew. My name was nowhere on it. Can I help you? The hostess at the gala check-in was young, blonde, and had the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Elliot Harrison, I said, handing her my fake business card. I should be on the list. She scrolled through her tablet, frowning. I don't see you here, Mr. Harrison. That's odd. I RSVP'd weeks ago. I leaned forward conspiratorially. I'm working with Brandon Lee on the Morrison account. He specifically asked me to be here tonight. The magic words. Brandon's name opened doors at Morrison and Associates like a skeleton key. The hostess's expression shifted from skeptical to apologetic. Let me check with my supervisor, she said. While she was gone, I spotted Cassie across the lobby. She looked stunning in a black dress I'd never seen before, laughing at something Brandon was whispering in her ear. His hand was on the small of her back, fingers spread possessively. My chest tightened, but I pushed the feeling down. I had work to do. Mr. Harrison? The supervisor was older, more experienced, and definitely not buying my story. I'm sorry, but without confirmation from Mr. Lee himself. Of course, I said smoothly. I'll just give him a call. I walked away before she could object, pulling out my phone and pretending to dial. Instead, I headed for the service elevator I'd spotted during my reconnaissance. The hotel staff was too busy with the gala to pay attention to one more guy in a suit. The service corridors were a maze of beige walls and industrial carpet, but I'd memorized the layout. 5 minutes later, I was in the hotel's IT closet, looking at a rack of servers that controlled everything from the elevators to the audiovisual system in the ballroom. My laptop connected to their network like a hot knife through butter. Hotel security was apparently designed to keep out drunk guests, not determined IT professionals with 3 days to plan. The ballroom was packed with Chicago's advertising elite, all of them drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than I made in a day. I'd made it inside through a service door, and now I was just another face in the crowd. I found Cassie at table 12, exactly where the email had said she'd be. She was holding court with her usual crew, Tina, Mallory, and Simon, while Brandon worked the room like the political animal he was. Elliot? Tina spotted me first, her voice sharp with surprise. What are you doing here? The conversation at the table stopped dead. 6 pairs of eyes stared at me like I was a party crasher, which technically I was. Surprise, I said, pulling out the empty chair next to Cassie. Thought I'd see what all the fuss was about. Cassie's face had gone pale under her makeup. How did you... I thought you were working tonight? I was. But then I figured, why should I miss my wife's big night? I sat down and smiled at the table. Hope you don't mind me joining you. Actually, Simon said, his voice dripping with the kind of fake politeness that made my skin crawl. This is kind of an industry thing. Invitation only. Oh, I know, I said. Lucky thing I'm so good with computers. The threat was subtle, but Cassie caught it. Her hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard enough to hurt. We should talk, she whispered. Later, I said. I want to hear the keynote first. Brandon was taking the stage, all confident smiles and practiced charm. He launched into a speech about innovation and creativity, about how Morrison and Associates was leading the industry into the future. I waited until he was really hitting his stride, talking about the importance of trust and partnership. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to a number I'd programmed earlier. The screens behind Brandon flickered. Instead of his PowerPoint slides, the audience was suddenly looking at a very different kind of presentation. Photos from Cassie's phone, the ones from her yoga retreat weekend. Cassie and Brandon at a romantic restaurant. Cassie and Brandon walking hand in hand along Lake Michigan. Cassie and Brandon in what was very obviously a hotel room. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shocked laughter, the sound of chairs scraping as people stood for a better look. Brandon spun around, saw the photos, and his face went from confident to horrified in about 2 seconds. "Turn it off!" he shouted at the AV tech. "Turn it off now!" But the damage was done. 300 of Chicago's advertising professionals had just gotten a very intimate look at their Golden Boys extracurricular activities. And in the front row, Brandon's wife was staring at the screen with the kind of expression that meant someone was going to need a very good lawyer. I looked at Cassie. She was staring at me with something between horror and admiration. "How?" she whispered. "You really should change your passwords," I said. "Creative 2019 is pretty obvious." The screens finally went dark, but the chaos continued. People were shouting, phones were out recording everything, and security was pushing through the crowd trying to restore order. I stood up, straightened my tie, and headed for the exit. "Where are you going?" Cassie called after me. "Home," I said without turning around. "I've got an early day tomorrow." I was halfway to my car when Brandon caught up with me in the parking garage. He'd lost the jacket and tie, and his perfect hair was messed up from running his hands through it. "You son of a bitch," he said, grabbing my arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Shown 300 people what kind of man you really are?" I shrugged out of his grip. "Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. My wife was in that room. My kids are going to see this online. Should have thought of that before you decided to screw around with my wife." He took a swing at me. I saw it coming from a mile away. The guy was a creative director, not a fighter. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him past me into the concrete wall. "Feel better?" I asked. Brandon straightened up, nursing his knuckles. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is." I pulled out my phone and showed him the recording I'd just made. "That was you threatening me, by the way, and trying to assault me. I'm thinking your wife's divorce lawyer would find this very interesting." His face went white. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you. You're irrelevant." I started walking toward my car. "But if you come near me or my wife again, I'll make tonight look like a warm-up act." I drove home through empty streets, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I'd done it. I'd actually pulled it off. The look on Brandon's face when those photos appeared would keep me warm for years. Cassie was waiting in our living room when I got home. She'd changed out of the gala dress into jeans and a sweater, and she'd been crying. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" I poured myself a drink, the good whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed to qualify. "Seems like everything's pretty clear. How long have you known?" 3 months, since it started." I sat down across from her, noting how she flinched when I said it. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" "I monitor network security for a living, Cassie. I notice when people are trying to hide things." "Why didn't you say anything?" "I kept hoping you'd come to your senses, that you'd remember we used to love each other." I took a sip of whiskey, letting it burn. "But then I saw that group chat, the way you talked about me, like I was some embarrassing relative you had to hide." She had the grace to look ashamed. "They don't know you like I do." "Apparently, neither do you." My phone buzzed with notifications. The gala photos were already making the rounds on social media. Galagate was trending on Twitter. Someone had posted a video of Brandon's meltdown, and it was racking up views by the minute. "This is going to ruin me," Cassie said, staring at her own phone. "Should have thought of that before you decided I wasn't important enough for your guest list." She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, human. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. I got caught up in that world, and I lost sight of what mattered." "What matters, Cassie?" "Us. Our marriage." I finished my drink and stood up. "There is no us. There hasn't been for months. Tonight just made it official. So what happens now? Now? Now you figure out how to explain to Morrison and Associates why their creative director was sleeping with a married VP. And I figure out how to rebuild my life without someone who thinks I'm an embarrassment. I headed upstairs, leaving her sitting in the wreckage of her perfect evening. My phone kept buzzing with messages. Jerome, wanting details. My brother in Seattle, who'd seen the story online. Even a few colleagues from work, offering congratulations and asking how I'd pulled it off. But the most interesting message came from an unknown number. Impressive work tonight. We should talk. Monsieur DeWitt, Morrison and Associates. Margaret DeWitt, the agency's managing partner.
A couple's spa. You took her to the place we go.
It was a birthday gift. She's a friend. Friends don't get $500 couples massage.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
The woman who'd built Morrison and Associates from nothing into one of Chicago's premier advertising firms. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I'm listening." Margaret DeWitt's office occupied the entire top floor of the Morrison and Associates building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of downtown Chicago. She was in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that made people straighten their spines when she walked into a room. "Mr. Harper," she said, not getting up from behind her massive desk. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for not having me arrested." She smiled at that, a thin, predatory expression that reminded me why she'd survived 30 years in Chicago advertising. "Oh, I considered it. What you did last night was technically corporate espionage, hacking into hotel systems, accessing private communications, causing a public disturbance." "Technically," I agreed. "But then I looked at your background. 15 years in IT security, spotless record, married to one of my creative directors." She leaned forward. "A creative director who's been having an affair with my VP of client relations. I'm not here to cause trouble for the agency. Aren't you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you just handed me a very convenient solution to a very inconvenient problem." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was recalculating everything. What kind of problem? Brandon Lee has been skimming from client accounts for 2 years. Nothing dramatic, a few thousand here and there, buried in expense reports and inflated vendor invoices. But it adds up. She slid a folder across the desk. I opened it to find financial records, bank statements, and what looked like a forensic accounting report. "We've been building a case against him for months," she continued. "But Brandon's smart, and he's got friends on the board. We needed something to discredit him publicly before we moved. And I gave you that. You gave me that." She stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city. "The question now is what we do about your wife." "What about her?" "Cassie's good at her job. Very good. But she's also been compromised. The affair, the photos, the public humiliation. She's damaged goods now. Clients won't trust her, and neither will the staff." I closed the folder and set it on the desk. "So, you're firing her." "I'm considering it, unless what?" She turned back to me, and I saw something calculating in her eyes. "No, unless I have a reason to keep her. Someone vouching for her character, someone who's proven he can be resourceful when the agency needs protecting." The offer hung in the air between us. I could save Cassie's career, but it would cost me. Margaret DeWitt didn't make deals without getting something valuable in return. "What exactly are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'd be interested in a consulting position. Corporate security, digital forensics, the kind of work that requires discretion and creativity." She named a salary that was 50% more than I was currently making. "And I'm asking if your wife might be willing to be more of a team player going forward." I thought about Cassie sitting in our living room last night, crying over the wreckage of her perfect evening. I thought about 15 years of marriage, of the woman I'd fallen in love with before she got seduced by power lunches and corner offices. I need to talk to her first. Of course, but don't take too long. The board meets tomorrow morning, and they're going to want answers about last night. I found Cassie at home, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the hope and fear warring in her eyes. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad. 3 clients have already called asking for new account managers. The Morrison family is reassessing their relationship with the agency, and someone leaked the group chat messages to add age." She turned the laptop around so I could see the article. Morrison and Associates in crisis after Gala scandal. The photo was from last night. Brandon on stage, looking horrified as the pictures of his affair played behind him. "Margaret DeWitt wants to see you," I said. Cassie's face went pale. "She's going to fire me." "Maybe. Or maybe she's going to give you a chance to fix this." I told her about my meeting with DeWitt, about Brandon's embezzlement, about the consulting offer. Cassie listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through surprise, relief, and something that might have been respect. "She wants you to spy on the agency," she said when I finished. "She wants me to protect it. There's a difference." "And what do you want?" It was a fair question. What did I want? Revenge? Forgiveness? A chance to start over? "I want to matter," I said finally. "I want to be more than just the guy who brings you coffee and gets left off guest lists." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You've always mattered. I forgot that for a while. Can you remember it now?" "I can try." My phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. "Turn on Channel 7, now." We found the remote and switched to the local news. A reporter was standing outside the Morrison and Associates building, microphone in hand. Sources confirm that VP Brandon Lee has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into financial irregularities. The agency's stock price has dropped 15% since markets opened this morning. "Jesus," Cassie whispered. The story continued for another 2 minutes, covering the Gala scandal, the affair, and speculation about what it meant for the agency's future. They even had a quote from one of Brandon's clients, expressing serious concerns about their account management. "He's finished," I said. "We might be too." I looked at my wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was scared, vulnerable, and finally seeing the consequences of her choices. But she was also the woman I'd married, the one who'd built a career from nothing and refused to let anyone tell her she wasn't good enough. "Not if we're smart about this," I said. "DeWitt's offering us a way out, a way to rebuild. Together? If you want to." She squeezed my hand. "I want to." The Morrison and Associates Emergency Board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., but I was in the building by 7, setting up equipment in the conference room. Margaret DeWitt had accepted my consulting offer, and my first assignment was to present the evidence against Brandon Lee. The board members filed in looking grim, 5 of Chicago's most powerful business leaders, all of them wondering how their prestigious advertising agency had turned into a tabloid scandal overnight. "Ladies and gentlemen," DeWitt began, "I think we all know why we're here. The events of last night have put this agency in an extremely difficult position." She gestured to me. "This is Elliot Harper, our new security consultant. He's going to walk us through some disturbing discoveries about Mr. Lee's conduct." I'd spent the morning organizing the evidence into a clear, damning presentation. Bank records showing suspicious transfers. Expense reports for dinners that never happened. Invoices from vendors that didn't exist. "Over the past 2 years," I said, clicking through the slides, "Mr. Lee has systematically embezzled approximately $400,000 from client accounts." The board members exchanged glances. 400,000 wasn't enough to sink the agency, but it was enough to destroy careers and trigger lawsuits. "The affair with Mrs. Harper was just the beginning," I continued. "Mr. Lee has been using his position to manipulate female employees, promising promotions in exchange for personal favors. That got their attention. Sexual harassment lawsuits could cost millions, not to mention the public relations nightmare." "Do we have proof of these allegations?" asked board member Patricia Chen. I nodded to DeWitt, who slid a thick folder across the table. "Sworn statements from 3 employees, documentation of improper advances, and recorded conversations where Mr. Lee explicitly offered career advancement in exchange for sexual favors." It wasn't entirely true. I'd manufactured some of the evidence, using my new access to the agency's systems. But Brandon had made enough enemies over the years that finding people willing to make statements wasn't difficult. "What's our exposure?" asked another board member. "Significant," DeWitt replied, "but manageable if we act quickly. I recommend immediate termination for cause, forfeiture of all benefits, and a complete audit of his accounts." The vote was unanimous. An hour later, I watched from DeWitt's office as security escorted Brandon from the building. He was carrying a cardboard box with his personal items, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. "He'll fight this," I said. "Let him try. By the time our lawyers are finished, he'll be lucky to get a job selling insurance." Cassie appeared in the doorway, looking nervous. "You wanted to see me?" "Come in," DeWitt said. "Close the door." My wife sat down across from the managing partner, her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She looked like a student called to the principal's office. "The board has decided to retain you," DeWitt said without preamble, "contingent on certain conditions." Relief flooded Cassie's face. "Anything. You'll be reporting directly to me for the next 6 months. Every campaign, every client interaction, every decision goes through my office first." "I understand. You'll also be taking a 20% pay cut, and your bonus structure is suspended indefinitely." Cassie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "And finally," DeWitt continued, "you'll be working closely with your husband on a comprehensive security review of all our client accounts. We need to make sure there are no more Brandon Lees hiding in our organization." "We can do that," I said. DeWitt smiled. "I'm counting on it." That evening, Cassie and I sat on our back deck, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sun set over Chicago. It was the first time we'd had dinner together in months. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. The agency, our marriage, everything. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is." My phone buzzed with a news alert. The story had made national headlines. "Chicago ad exec fired in embezzlement scandal." The photo showed Brandon being escorted from the building, looking like a man who'd lost everything. "Do you feel bad for him?" Cassie asked. I thought about it. Brandon had everything: money, power, respect. He'd thrown it all away for an affair and some stolen cash. But more than that, he'd treated people like they didn't matter, like I didn't matter. "No," I said, "I don't." 3 months later, Morrison and Associates announced its most profitable quarter in 5 years. The Brandon Lee scandal had actually helped business, positioning the agency as a company that took ethics seriously. Cassie had been promoted to senior creative director, with a corner office and a team of 12. She still worked long hours, but now she came home to me at night. And me? I'd become the agency's director of corporate security, with a staff of 6 and a budget that would have made my old boss weep with envy. My job was to protect the agency from threats, both external and internal. I was very good at it. The final piece of the puzzle came on a Friday afternoon. I was reviewing security footage from the previous night when I spotted a familiar figure trying to break into the building's parking garage. Brandon Lee, looking desperate and unshaven, attempting to vandalize cars in the executive parking section, probably targeting DeWitt's Mercedes or Cassie's new BMW. I could have called the police. Should have, really. But instead, I walked down to the garage and confronted him myself. "Hello, Brandon." He spun around, eyes wild. He'd lost weight, and his expensive suit had been replaced with jeans and a wrinkled shirt. "You," he snarled. "You destroyed my life." "Actually, you did that yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it." He lunged at me, but desperation had made him clumsy. I sidestepped easily and watched him crash into a concrete pillar. "You want to know the funny thing?" I said as he picked himself up. "I never wanted to destroy you. I just wanted my wife back." "She was never yours," he spat. "She came to me because you're nothing. A nobody." I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing him the recording I'd just made of our conversation. Breaking and entering. Attempted vandalism. Threatening behavior. That should be good for at least 6 months. His face crumpled. "Please, I've got nothing left." "You've got exactly what you deserve." I called the police and waited with him until they arrived. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said. Yes, I replied. It is. That night, Cassie and I celebrated at the same restaurant where she'd had her first working dinner with Brandon. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Any regrets? She asked over dessert. I thought about the question seriously. A year ago, I'd been a nobody, a guy who fixed computers and got left off guest lists. Now I had power, respect, and a wife who looked at me like I mattered. Just one, I said. What's that? I should have done it sooner. She laughed, and for the first time in years, it sounded genuine. 6 months later, Brandon Lee was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. The case made headlines again, with reporters calling it a cautionary tale about corporate corruption and personal responsibility. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was too busy with my new life, running security for one of Chicago's most successful agencies, married to a woman who finally understood what she'd almost lost. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about that email that started it all. +1. Like I was an afterthought in my own marriage. Now I was the +1 everyone wanted on their guest list.